You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week, Buddy Cops, Samurai Cop, and Officer Alien are on the case. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have 2 good movies, the other 2 bad ones. Let the chaos begin. And I am Adam Thomas, a no-nonsense decorated podcaster who will play things by the book.
And I'm Thomas Mariani, a renegade podcaster who doesn't play by any sort of rules.
You're reckless, Mariani.
You're square, Thomas.
But I guess we'll have to solve this case together anyway. Oh, fucking stupid.
Yes, welcome to the Double-Edged Double Bill, where we really get into our meaty roles, as it were. But it is in celebration of what we're doing today, is buddy cop films in honor of Bad Boys for Life coming out, which weirdly has gotten a lot of good reviews. It baffles me. It's insane.
I mean, is it just nostalgia reasons, or is this actually going to be a good movie? I don't know. Because 1 was fun, but it's also very dated. 2 is insane, over-the-top Michael Bay craziness.
2 is literally the best and worst of Michael Bay isms all at once.
I think so. I mean, there's the helicopter shots, the driving through the favelas, the fucking crazy camera angles, 2 guns, all that shit.
They literally destroy Cuba in that movie.
I know, and how'd they get over there and get all these guns and everything? What the fuck? Anyways.
We should talk about Bad Boys 2 at some point. It's a fascinating film. For sure.
It really is.
Yes it is. But we're not talking about any of those 3 films today, but we are talking about 2 buddy cop films here. Last week, at the end of our show, if you're new here, each week Adam and I each have 2 movies. Sometimes I have 2 good movies, sometimes Adam has 2 bad movies, or vice versa, and we assign both those movies that we have for whatever quality, a number between 1 and 10, and then at the end of the show, the other person picks number between 1 and 10, and we get closer to whatever good and bad choice we end up getting. And in the case of last week, we ended up getting, for Adam's good pick, Alien Nation from 1988, and we ended up getting my bad pick of Samurai Cop from 1991, and both fit in the buddy cop genre, and we've actually been, in the cards to do this episode since, the beginning of the show. This was, one of the first things we thought about doing. We just never ended up getting to it until the time was right, and now seemed like a pretty good time. Are you a big fan of the subgenre, then, Adam?
I definitely was growing up. There was the Dragnets, and, Alien Nation, As I Chose, and Beverly Hills Cop, 48 Hours. There was all these great ones. And then, in the 90s, you got Rush Hour, Lethal Weapon movies, all those. They're all great examples of the genre. But they just don't make them anymore, really. I mean, they do, but they're either Hollywood Homicide or straight to fucking streaming, and they're garbage. So you don't, which Hollywood Homicide is also garbage, but you don't really get them anymore. But yeah, I used to love buddy cop movies.
Well, yeah, because I can probably see why, because I still remember... do you remember that one with Jake Johnson and Damon Wayans Jr., the Let's Be Cops? When that came out? That was...
yeah.
I remember that distinctly because that came out, I think, a couple weeks after Trayvon Martin. All that shit happened. And I'm like, oh, that's why this isn't going to happen that much anymore. Because it just feels like a reckless cop genre picture kind of thing doesn't feel as fun, maybe, in a modern context.
Yeah, and I'd argue it's still not very fun at all. The idea of a loose cannon police officer, yeah, no, don't want that.
I think, honestly, that genre kind of, hit its sort of apex, where it's I don't know if you can do much more with it after the 2 21 Jump Street movies. I don't feel like you can do much after those 2 just, completely satirized and skewered that genre, too. It's like The Airplane, where it's you can't do another airport movie after that.
Yeah, that's true. It's a complete deconstruction of the genre.
But I still do like the genre, especially some of the older ones. It's weird, because I kind of even came of age during an age where, like, the buddy cop thing was sort of played out. I can still remember one of my favorite jokes from The Critic is there's a point where he's reviewing one of these movies, and it's like Clint Eastwood is teamed up. It's like, okay, here are your different partners. A kid, an old lady, a monkey. It's like in a row of, like, how many different sorts of partner they had. Like, that's the thing. That genre was already sort of a joke, even, like, a post-Lethal Weapon, because, like, it's weird. The evolution of that genre is fascinating, especially doing research. I didn't even think of this, but it's true. Where do you think the start of the buddy cop genre is? Because I have one distinct movie.
Ooh. Oh boy.
Because, like, a lot of people would say, like, Lethal Weapon reinvigorated it, but it was there way before, I would argue, with Lethal Weapon. But doing the research, I did realize, like, this makes the most sense. In the Heat of the Night is technically, like, the text of the buddy cop genre. Yeah, it's a much more serious, dramatic movie, won Best Picture at the time in 1967, but it's, like, the text for every single buddy cop trope. There was a pretty good one written by Walter Hill around that time called Hickey and Boggs, which stars Robert Culp and name redacted, who I'm not going to mention.
Now you got to mention him, because I don't know the movie.
It's Bill Cosby. It's Robert Culp and Bill Cosby in, like, a buddy cop movie from, like, 1972. It's a bummer, because it's actually a pretty good one. I mean, and even Walter Hill, like, you can see in that movie, since Walter Hill wrote it, a lot of the stuff that would later inspire, like, 48 Hours, which is another great example of the genre.
Did you know Jay Leno's in a buddy cop movie with
Pat Morita? Right, I'm aware of that. In doing research, I was like, of the various bad ones I could do, I saw that, I'm like, oh, that was sort of like the bankruptcy point, right? There were a bunch of those, especially like post-Lethal Weapon, there were so many of those weird ones. And even they got to a point, like, we're going to talk about one where it's like, oh, let's do a fantasy creature of sorts and have it paired up with a human being. We even talked about one ages ago on our show with Theodore Rex.
Yeah, and we covered another one elsewhere with Bright.
Right, that's true, yeah, that was a more recent example. But anyway, I think it's time we sort of, while we're talking about this specific point, it's as good a time as any to transition into our good feature, Alien Nation.
The newcomers have arrived. They have their own custom, their own mysteries, and their own crimes.
Sykes, here's your new partner.
My true name is Stangya Sorens. Well, Gesundheit.
Now, James Caan and Mandy Patinkin are headed deep inside an alien world of violence, desire, and power. Alien Nation.
So, Alien Nation, get it? It's a pun.
Yes.
Came out October 7th, 1988, and was directed by Graham Baker, stars James Caan as our human, who has to team up with an alien, played by Mandy Patinkin in heavy makeup. And yeah, it is pretty much, it's the classic buddy cop dynamic of one's by the book, the other one's a bit of a renegade, but the twist is one of them is not of this world, in a world where aliens have been around for like a couple years, but now they've officially become citizens after being kind of held up for a while. And, but this was your pick, Adam, and, what are your initial thoughts then on Alien Nation?
Now, when I first saw this when I was a kid, I absolutely loved this movie. Everything about it, the design of the aliens, the names they chose, Sam Francisco and, Rudyard Kipling and all that. I just thought it was great. Obviously, as a child, I didn't get any of the subtext that was going on. I just saw it as a buddy cop movie.
Is this a metaphor for something, Adam? I don't know what you're talking about. What was this a metaphor for?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's pretty subtle.
Watching it now, yeah, it's still kind of prescient a little bit. Still relates. It's a little bit harder to watch now because of some of it, but I still actually kind of enjoy the movie. But I've seen it, and I've seen it a lot because I watched it a lot when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. Especially because of Mandy Patinkin, because I was fascinated that was the guy from The Princess Bride.
Of course, yes.
What are your thoughts as a first-time viewer? I'm very, very curious.
Well, yeah, because I hadn't seen this before. I had heard of it mostly in relation to some of these other also-rans we've kind of been talking about of, like, these buddy cop movies. Like, when Bright came out, I heard a lot of comparisons. Even when District 9 came out, I heard a lot of people, like, the few naysayers at the time were like, oh, it's just Alien Nation. Which, I mean, technically there's a lot of, like, thematic resemblance I can see. And I'd also heard of it because it would later be turned into a TV show that weirdly lasted like one season and also several TV movies, which is interesting that it had such a life after its one season. And knowing that, even if like I didn't know anything about like the TV show that would come later, this feels like a really cool sort of blueprint for a bigger universe. Like, there's a lot of good potential in this idea, and I really do like the sort of world they kind of hint at and reference. But you can tell it kind of feels like we're leaving too much off the plate, and not quite giving us enough room to explore this world that feels a bit more small than it should be, I think, in this particular, 89-minute movie. Which is say it's still fun. I think particularly the chemistry between Patinkin and James Caan works really well. Because admittedly, James Caan is like the perfect example of how to be like the cool, calm, collected guy who doesn't give a single shit. And then Mandy Patinkin being a bit more straight-laced. It almost feels like the constricting makeup helps for his character in that way. I think their kind of back and forth really keeps the movie alive pretty consistently. But I did keep thinking definitely, like, I would want to see expanded more rather than this kind of truncated one we got here. It feels like it's a whole season of TV in 89 minutes.
Yeah, I can't disagree. It had a good budget for the time. I mean, $16 million. It's a pretty good-sized budget in 1988. This, to me, would work perfectly if they redid it like they did V a couple years ago, or, something like that, where they just brought back this really cool sci-fi science fiction concept that never really got a fair shake and redid it now. And now, could you imagine this now, how well it would work, too?
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Admittingly, there's kind of been like a sort of uprising, especially sort of in a post-Bright world. A lot of people kind of commenting on, like, well, in a world where we kind of get this in a more natural setting of, like, oh, hey, like, instead of this alien race, you actually have, like, black people, Hispanic people, all this other stuff. They're kind of, like, shortchanged. It feels like, why are we kind of creating a whole sci-fi universe for that when there's, like, more fruitful stories you could actually use other people for? I get that, but at the same time, with this story, there's so much potential. I think it's less like an issue of the budget and more an issue, for me, of the direction for this one in terms of, like, how small the world feels. Because you can do, like, a smaller, like, runtime but still create a whole world. Like, another example that came out this year of sort of, like, a silly take on the buddy cop movie that's fucking phenomenal at building its world is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And that movie's not too much longer than this. But you get a bigger sense of, like, L.A. with Toontown and all this other stuff being truncated, whatever the time frame is of that movie. This one just feels a lot more like, hey, it's our world, but these dudes look like aliens.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, but I want to kind of address what you said, where people are like, well, you don't need to make it aliens. This stuff is happening in reality. We could, why not address it? Well, I get that, but on the flip side, too, I also get it where, sometimes you watch a movie or go to the movies to escape the reality and the bullshit and then horrible things that are happening around you. And for them to take, which is obviously, I'm going to assume African Americans and make them aliens, in a way it's escapism, but also keeping it sort of in your head too, that there is shit going on. The subtext, or even if you want to call it, it's not very subliminal in this, it's kind of right in your face. But still, sometimes that can help situations too. It can maybe open somebody's eyes. It can maybe be like, well, holy shit, and they start thinking about the things that are going on around them because of a fantasy sort of version of reality, and it makes them connect. Like I said, it's a very hard thing for me to jump on either side.
Right, given we're also two white guys, so it's kind of hard to have that.
Well, no. Even if I'm not a white guy, I'm talking as far as film in general. Now, film can be a very important tool to sort of bring issues to the forefront and sort of, maybe open other people's eyes and, show the ugly in the world. But film's also used to escape the ugly in the world and get away from it for an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever, and just literally do nothing but be entertained and not have to think about your shitty job or your dickhead neighbor or whatever it is for 2 hours. So it's hard, especially with movies like this that have such subtext, to sort of look at it from both angles. Unfortunately, you either have to pick one or the other, usually.
No, I don't necessarily think, like, I think you could do something interesting with that. I think it's more problematic, I guess, when you have some, like, say, a Bright, which I would argue has this weird turn where it's like, oh yeah, these fancy creatures have always kind of existed in our society. And it's like, no, they're on level exactly with Mexicans who are, like, pretty much, like, because they're like, Mexican cops in that movie who are like, oh man, it's just like the Alamo. Like, we know exactly how this felt for you, orc cop. And it's like, that feels a lot more problematic in terms of what it's doing, as opposed to this is like trying to draw more of like a direct parallel metaphor kind of thing that I can at least respect, especially even at the time. And I don't think that's like the biggest problem with this movie as much as, like I said, I think the world just feels a lot smaller in a way that I wish they would kind of be able to expand it, even just on a pure visual level. I just think Graham Baker, who is like a guy who did a lot of Workman-like projects, very much a director for hire, just kind of did a very typical buddy cop movie, but only had like these people in the really cool makeup design to kind of differentiate it. It doesn't feel like there's much of anything different beyond like the very small glimpses we get of like, here's their sports game, here's how like they drink spoiled milk and stuff to get drunk and everything like that. It feels like we're just on the very small periphery of a really like cooler thing we could expand upon.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe, but then would it be the same movie at that point then?
No, it would be the same movie. You would just like get a bit more of a perspective on it. I feel like, if anything, my whole thing is like, this feels like a great pilot for a bigger series, like a pilot movie for a larger thing that
I could see that, or even like a spec script,
right? Or like a TV movie that opens up as your like, pilot for your series. Which, I mean, to be fair, I'm saying all this. I have not seen a frame of that TV show. I don't know if that's
terrible.
Okay.
No, it's not good.
Okay.
Not good. Terrence Stamp though.
No, Terrence Stamp is fun.
Terrence Stamp was great.
Of course, Terrence Stamp's always fun as like a villain character. I definitely did feel like the whole Disney death thing of him being like, oh, hey, he's totally dead, guys, he OD'd. And then he becomes this bigger monster creature, which, if anything, that shows the biggest sort of like budget issues. It's just like a big hulking dude who's clearly not Terrence Stamp either. Like, he was not in that suit for the end of it, which I'm not surprised by. I don't necessarily know if we needed that. That feels like, oh, the movie's too short, and we gotta like pad out a bit of the end. My issues I'm kind of talking about only speaks to like how good the chemistry is between Caan and Patinkin. I think because I just like I want to see these two go on sort of more buddy cop adventures, especially sort of like having the alien explore our world and our crimes through his perspective. I think would be really interesting, especially considering some of the stuff they build up. Like, I love just him examining like how James Caan like tries to get something out of a particular witness, and then he's like, hey, if you want a better sort of reaction, our weak points are like under our armpits and stuff like that, just giving weird like police tactics almost to kind of explore things. Like, I would like to see more of like these two just bouncing off each other.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think the chemistry is absolutely there. I think this is one of James Caan's most like sort of lighthearted performances. Don't get me wrong, he's a cop, he's tough, but he's kind of silly, he's kind of a goof. Mandy Patinkin is, to me though, steals the movie. He's fantastic. Even under that, as you previously mentioned, super confining, caked on makeup, he's really, really good in this. I would like to see these two characters maybe continue on to see where they go, you know, because like you said, the chemistry is really good. They are constantly learning from each other in different ways. You know, Sam really cares about James Caan's character. It's kind of sweet. And then at the end, you know, obviously James Caan ends up caring about him. It's the classic dynamic that always happens. I don't know if it's the length, the direction, or what, but there is something missing here. Like, maybe there isn't enough follow through. The ending definitely is like, okay, of course, he takes drug and ODs because they've been alluding to this drug all fucking movie. So, of course, Terrence Stamp's going to do it. Now he's the goddamn Incredible Hulk mixed with Venom and mixed with whatever the shit. And water is the weakness, which is kind of, the beach scene was really cool with that. But still, there is something missing here. And it's not budget, and it's not acting caliber. So I guess it does have to be script.
With something like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I like that they're able to draw at least more direct parallels that feel a lot more sort of like detail-oriented and interesting, because you see glimpses of that with, like I said, some of the little behaviors that Mandy Patinkin does, and even like how he gets sort of like roid ragey almost at a certain point near the climax of the movie. But with like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, like for example, the Ink and Paint Club, where they have like, oh, it's a secret club for toons in a world where toons are sort of prejudice against them, and it's this big vibrant place that comments on actual sort of racist issues that happened at that particular time in LA, but at the same time it feels like, oh, this is like just building our world in an interesting fashion that like gives a sense of like who the toons sort of are as entertainers. And in this movie, the equivalent of that is like a very typical sort of biker bar, but with aliens there. Like that's all the detail there is, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. God damn it, I hate you.
And I'm saying all this like I still like this movie.
No, I get it. I get it. You're not wrong. I mean, I have blinders on a little bit. I'll be honest. I mean, like I said, I grew up loving this fucking movie. But watching it again, like I do still find it very entertaining, but it is pretty heavily flawed.
I think if nothing else, it's also because it's a very sort of traditional buddy cop script. The plot, ostensibly, is just, there's a drug that's being passed around from this alien world that kept them sort of, like, alive while they were, like, slave labor, being the carrot on the stick to fuel them to keep going. Terrence Stamp, who was, like, this big respected member of this alien race on Earth, is basically integrating it back into the community, which, given the 80s, actually, that's a lot more relevant than maybe they even thought of at the time, considering some stuff a certain administration did in the 80s. It feels like there's definitely interesting hints here and there, but it feels like it's sort of like a bit more diluted down for a more traditional buddy cop narrative story that we've seen before.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty formulaic when you get to the nitty gritty. I guess I can't disagree with you again, you fucking piece.
Of what? Don't leave me in suspense here.
Yes.
A twist.
I do really like the world building here for what you get from it. I love the dynamic of the two leads. Not even upset with the idea of this drug that, they manufacture that makes them super strong. If they take too much of it, that's fine, whatever. The water weakness, that's cool. It feels like the main case, or whatever you want to call it, is too self-contained. I do think you're onto something there. They could have really blown the world wide open, gone to different locales, talked to different, whatever. They could have really, really done something, even got more political with it. But as it stands for an 89-minute movie, from the 80s, sci-fi buddy cop movie, I still think it's decent. Like, it's not bad. It's not as, I don't look at it as finely as I did when I was a child, but, most things people don't.
No, what are you talking about? Everything from my childhood is great, Adam, and you can't question any of that.
Yeah, that's true. Right. God, fuck me. But no, I still think it's pretty good, and it's an oft not thought of example of buddy cop. Nobody talks about Alienation.
Pretty much I'm in the same boat with you on that. In terms of, if anything else, I just see like so much cool potential in this universe they are kind of at least somewhat building here. I only wish to see it expanded a bit further, or with it, like you're talking about, seeing more corners of this world, seeing different avenues. Like, we see that one sports game. It's like, what the fuck is this? What's their Quidditch? I'm curious. What the fuck is this? Or even just like them assimilating into our natural lives. We get a bit of that with, like, we see the family of the same character, which that's another thing, just we don't get that family more. I would love to see more of like his home life. See how like his wife maybe is integrated.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, see some of that. That's the thing. It's just there's so many like cool little avenues that I would like to see them go down, and they don't quite, maybe for the reasons that we're talking about. It just feels like we kind of got to get the beats of the buddy cop story here and there, which is why I would definitely say we did a show like several like months ago of like a good and bad movies that are worth remaking. This is, I would say, a pretty good example of one. Even with some of the issues I brought up earlier, I could still see someone maybe having the best eye to kind of like take this conceit and do something a bit more with it. If anything, what it kind of reminds me of is the makeup design even kind of reminds me of this. A movie like Enemy Mine, which I think is 2/3 of like a great movie, and then the last third of it kind of dwindles down.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the only Dennis Quaid movies I actually kind of still enjoy.
Well, a lot of that is Lou Gossett Jr. though, who's like works.
All of it, absolutely all of it is Lou Gossett Jr.
Yeah.
I've said it before. I'll say fuck Dennis Quaid, but no, that's a good call. I could absolutely see this being remade and working.
Keeping certain key details, like especially what you should not touch, is scenes like them interacting with each other at James Caan's house. Like, that scene is perfect. The two of them, like, he's drinking, like, actual whiskey, and Mandy Patinkin's drinking a sour milk, and he's trying to teach him how to do jokes and stuff like that. Just like, no, you see, the pen isn't there, it's a thermometer. Then, you know where the pen is? Up his rectum. Yes! Exactly! It's funny, right? It's so funny. Like, I like their back and forth in sequences like that. If anything, we should have just had more of, as opposed to, like, occasionally cutting over. It's like, oh, look, there's Terrence Stamp, and he's doing something kind of sinister or whatever. Accentuating a plot that I don't give as much of a shit about as these two guys hanging out.
Yeah, I agree. Good call. That's why I do this show.
It gives you that perspective. I'll count that as my final thoughts, and if you have anything to add.
I mean, no. No, I mean, for a sort of not common James Caan performance and a really fun Mandy Patinkin, if that's all you care about is acting, then it's worth a watch. If you like cool 80s sci-fi, then it's worth a watch for that too. Is it great? Is it going to blow your mind? No, but it's fun.
Yeah, if nothing else, just to see these makeup designs, which we didn't talk about much, but I think really do hold up quite well. It's like just human enough for them to integrate, but just off enough for it to be almost like the Uncanny Valley. And it's done by Stan Winston's studio, and it's a phenomenal job. And it's also one of the post-Terminator projects Galen Hurd did as a producer. So if nothing else, that's interesting. And you can tell by some of the supporting cast, like right at the beginning, like, oh fuck, Earl Bowen's in this movie? As our newscaster?
Yeah, I know.
That threw me off for a second. I'm like, oh fuck, you're in non-Terminator things? That's weird. But yeah, I would definitely still say it's worth seeking out. A lot of potent potential there for something else to blossom. There's all sorts of potential in anything, including, like, say, the ESO podcast feed for this particular show that you can queue up right after ours.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the comedy stylings of Hugh for the Borg Collective. When I was part of the Borg Collective, my Borg wife was so fat, when she sat around the collective, she sat around the collective. The Monster Sci-Fi Show is part of the ESO network. It's sci-fi from a certain point of view.
Alright, and now let's get into our bad film. Our glorious, glorious bad film. Samurai Cop.
Are you Fujiyama?
Yes, I am. Who are you?
I'm a cop.
His real name is Joe Marshall. They call him Samurai.
You're the one that talked me into bringing this moron from San Diego to fight the Japanese katana gang.
I want him dead.
How did you know I'd come home with you?
Let's just say I can read eyes.
So, Samurai Cop supposedly was released November 30th, 1991. It was like its one festival screening before it disappeared into obscurity for a while. It is written and directed by Amir Shervin, and is star-studded cast of Robert Zadar, one of the guys from Big Trouble in Little China, and a bunch of people you've never heard of. This is one that's sort of an infamous bad movie that I'd heard about a lot. I'd seen several clips from, but I'd never just sat down and watched the full thing. And what a thing of beauty it is, Adam.
Oh, it's a huge piece of shit, isn't it?
But it's in very much the same way that we would classify some of our old favorites, like a Miami Connection, way back when we covered Miami Connection. It's in that same vicinity, for sure, because this is a very amateurish production.
Oh, you think? It's one of the most amateurish fucking productions I've ever seen. It is ridiculous.
I know you're a big fan of this one, Adam, so why don't you give people maybe a taste, if you can possibly describe Samurai Cop?
Okay, I can try. Samurai Cop is about Joe, the Samurai Cop.
The titular Samurai Cop, yes.
Apparently he's a samurai and knows martial arts.
He was taught by the best samurai in Japan, Adam, as we were told early on in the film, in our first scene.
Which clearly he doesn't know martial arts. But he somehow, he stops a drug bust or a drug deal in the beginning and then gets in, on the bad side of this fucking gang that's just a mixed match of races and weirdos. And his partner is constantly making weird googly faces behind him.
Don't you dismiss the great power of Officer Frank Washington, sir, and his ability to make faces at the camera.
That's about as far as I get. There's wigs, clearly wigs underneath hats.
There's multiple awkward sex scenes.
Joe really likes to wear banana hammocks. Like, it's really fucking weird, dude. And he's like, he has supposedly Asian-inspired house, but there's like a day bed with like one of your grandmother's comforters on it that they're gonna bang on.
Excuse me, are you assuming that is not the house of an eligible bachelor who just keeps bringing in honeys all the time?
Yeah, 1,000%. I don't know eligible bachelors that have doilies laying around. And it just, the sped up like footage when Robert Zadar is trying to look like he knows what he's doing with a sword. It's fucking ridiculous. This movie is the most ridiculous thing ever.
Well, Adam, I thought it was a masterful piece of cinematic police detective work, and you're absolutely 100% right. This is fucking silly as shit, and it's a lot of fun. Especially considering, like, were you aware of any of the behind-the-scenes shenanigans that were going on with this movie?
No, I was not aware of any of that.
Yes, it becomes a lot more clear. I would definitely recommend watching Red Letter Media, who's a YouTube channel I used to watch a lot, did a great interview with Matt Hannon, who is the star of our film, the titular samurai cop, as we have mentioned. And he goes into detail about the insane production of this movie, which mainly includes stuff like, oh, hey, we're going to go out and shoot, and we have no idea what scenes we're shooting, up into and including the bit in this opening chase you're talking about, where a man catches on fire, and both him and the guy who plays his partner, Mark Frazier, had to literally put the guy out on camera, and they just include that in the fucking movie.
It's clearly not the same guy, too.
No, yeah, who was driving the car. Not at all, no.
Not at all.
Right, because he's very clearly displayed under all that fire retardant gel. But that was an actual thing, is that, like, Matt Hannon talked about, oh yeah, we were told right then we were going to put him out, like, right before we shot the scene, and it's going to be one take, and we have to, like, save this man from dying, basically, with a fire extinguisher that looks about the size of a thermos, and then also a blanket. And you're an actor tasked to fucking save this man's life, basically, on camera. It's insane. And just hearing him also talk about how, like, he did a lot of the shooting, and then he took a break and, like, cut his hair to get more auditions. And then he was told in December, like, oh, hey, come back, we're doing reshoots. Why'd you cut your hair? And they have a clear wig that's displayed at any close-up shot. Like, all the close-ups in this movie are clearly shot months later. And you can tell just the massive look of disdain on his face during that whole monologue in the restaurant is phenomenal.
It's one of the worst wigs I've ever seen on anyone. It's clearly like a woman's wig that they just slapped on him and put like the loosest, shittiest looking baseball cap they can on top of it.
Right, and certain scenes that are also clearly shot like, oh, we need to keep this together, even though they don't seem to care about it in any of the fight scenes where it clearly moves or comes off at one point. It's just so fucking ridiculous. And like I said, when he is delivering that monologue in the restaurant, and he's just going on, just like, all of you motherfuckers are gonna know that you can't go out there and pour these drugs to our children while you put in your Swiss bank accounts and all this shit. Just the look on his face where he's just like, I am so done, and I hate that this is my career right now. Because this is like him fresh off of like doing acting school, and he had done like one other movie before this, and it's just like he was given this script like, oh, this is gonna be my big break, and then he read it and he's like, okay, this is silly, but we can make it work. And then the production happened, and then by that point, during these reshoots that are inside that fucking director's office, just clearly not the same location at all of the restaurant or any other place, the same exact goddamn office, all these fucking close-ups are shot. He just has this look of like, why did my parents are gonna see this? Or no one will see it, I don't know.
No one saw it.
No, not until it became the massive cult classic that it is now.
With 2 sequels?
With 2 sequels, right, which I've only seen a bit of whichever one is on Prime. I don't know if that's because I've heard, like, isn't that like a recut of the second movie?
Pretty much.
Right, yeah, they just took the second movie and just remixed it. I watched like the first 5 minutes of it, and I'm like, no, because this doesn't feel as sincerely bad as the other one. This feels so wink and noddy.
Yeah, they're trying to be bad. That's why you get Tommy Wiseau as the villain or whatever. Like, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Were you able to catch the riff tracks of this?
Yes, I was. Because, admittedly, the first time I didn't remember much because I was a bit drunk.
Sure.
I mean, the riff tracks is hilarious, but particularly the whole bit that Bill Corbett goes on about, like, oh, I'm a stuntman who hurt myself during Samurai Cop. Hey, Billy, did you get those drugs from your parents' cabinet that I asked you for? And all this shit. It's a very funny riff tracks. This works perfectly as a Mystery Science Theater 3000 movie, because there are so many endless long pauses between dialogue.
Absolutely. I think it's almost like it's done on purpose. Do you think that they made a good movie?
Well, I mean, this is a classic case, apparently, according to Matt Hannon, of somebody who is foreign. In this case, Amir Shevran is an Iranian filmmaker who only knew of America based on what he'd seen in movies and stuff, much like Y.K. Kim of Miami Connection. It was like, oh no, this is movie. This is exactly what Americans talk like in movie. This is clearly the American experience. And most of it was like very much scripted down to the letter, except for like a few improvised bits, like apparently the undercover bit with him and his partner, which is so stupid. Like, this is one of the rare times where, like, a movie is intentionally trying to be funny, and it circles around from, like, oh, this is so unfunny, but the execution is so terrible, it comes back to being funny again, with any of their, like, back and forth. Especially, we gotta talk about Adam. The fucking scene at the doctor's office, where the nurse hits on Matt Hannon. We keep getting these reaction shots of fucking Mark Fraser just reacting, apparently to, like, he knew no idea what specific line he was reacting to. It was just like, hey, make funny face from the director. And he's like, okay, I'll do that, which he does, like, 90% of the movie that he's on screen is him making fucking faces.
I mean, that's literally it. Someone gave you car. React. Someone said funny joke. React. It's ridiculous. So to go back to what I said, though, the director really thought he was making a good movie. They all knew it was shit, but the director thought he was doing something good.
Yeah, see, Matt Hannon described many times, but just like being like, I was like at the mercy of his vision, quote unquote, to do whatever the fuck he wanted. There were also several points where he like was kind of fed up and he's just like, you know what, I'm just gonna do stuff that he probably won't use because like there's no way he's gonna use these takes. And of course he used every single one of those takes. Like anytime he's doing the weird hand motions, he's clearly doing like the devil horns or like so many other things where he's like interacting off. Keep in mind the guy who's playing like sort of the main actual martial artist, Gerald Okumara, is like an actual trained martial artist. And he was the guy who like choreographed, which is code for, hey, we're gonna plan this and rehearse it in like 15 minutes before we shoot it, any of the fight scenes. Like he was apparently tasked with just like, hey, I guess you can do this. I guess, sure. And where we get, like, so many of these, like, great back and forth fight. Like, my favorite fight scene is, like, in that weird club area where, like, he goes up and that one guy's like, hey, I got him. He's got, like, a fucking, like, paddle thing for whatever reason instead of a sword. And he's gonna attack Bad Hand. He gets kicked in the balls a bunch of times. And it's, like, such, like, bad choreography that almost feels like, was this actually choreographed by, like, a bunch of children at a playground? It feels about as professional as that.
Yeah, it feels like improv fighting.
But it's not even a yes and, it's a yes and okay, I guess.
Yeah, it's just, this to me it's not on the level of Miami Connection. Miami Connection to me is just perfection. But this is right up there to where if people haven't seen this, like this, Jim Cotta, ones like that, like, oh, you got to see this. And have you seen Jim Cotta?
I'm aware of Jim Caan. I have not seen Jim Caan in full. I've seen the pommel horse scene.
Back pocket.
I fully embrace that. But I agree with you that it's not quite Miami Connection. And I think it's because both times I watched it, even with the riff tracks, I felt this, like, after the last really funny sequence to me in this chronologically is the whole bit where he picks up that random woman and they go over to his house and he does, like, the happy birthday thing and all this other shit. Like, after that point, it's still funny bad, but it's never quite, like, hits those heights. And I think that's because, like, with the Miami Connection, you have the whole thing where it's like, oh, okay, we end most of our story, but then we have the gang attack them in the woods and all the bloody carnage that happens, like, during, like, the climax of that movie. The climax of this one feels much more traditionally like, oh, this is a bad version of, like, a Miami Vice shootout, as it kind of ends on its whimper.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. But anytime Robert Zadar is on screen, it's just always fun.
Who we've talked about previously with, like, Tango and Cash, and is one of the most recognizable B-movie faces of all time.
Yeah, he's a maniac cop.
Oh, he's a maniac cop. He's in so many other things. And his presence here, it's weird how he feels too good for this.
I know.
The star of Soul Taker feels too good for this, Adam.
I know, you're 100% right. You're watching going, oh, Robert. You shouldn't have sunk to this level. I just love that the hospital scene in general, too, where he sneaks in with her in the bed. And it's like, come on. Or she sneaks him in. Actually,
right,
and
very subtly in that giant fucking bag. The only thing that could hold his fucking head, his massive head, is that fucking like weird wastebasket thing they stuff him in, and then he cuts out this head so succinctly, just like one slice of the katana, and then it's immediately off.
I know, and there's just gore everywhere. They don't even get like close to getting out of there. When they're like leaving, they're making it so obvious that they just pulled some shit like all over the place.
And like Robert Starr clearly has gore on his fucking smock and shit like that. And they're like escaping. And I love also something we haven't talked about: the dubbing of this movie, the amazing dubbing where you have like the two main stars do their own dubbing, but every other voice is Amir Sevran having to like pour that like, "Hey, what are you doing? What's that over there? How's this going?" Right down to, like, one of the other great examples of this is that random scene where Matt Hannon is talking to the guy who's, like, looking at the film, like, being developed. It's like, I don't know why you need footage of a mobster's house. That's actually Mark Fraser, the partner, dubbing over that old white guy's voice. And you can clearly tell it does not sound at all like an old white guy.
You couldn't get some dude off the street real quick to take care of that for you?
I know, apparently they couldn't afford it.
Clearly.
Like, there's so many points, apparently, where, like, as production kept going, certain things kept getting lost, and that's when he noticed that, like, oh, this is a very amateur production, where it's like, oh, hey, where's our boom guy? Oh, he's not here anymore. Hey, can you shout your dialogue?
This is the best movie ever made.
Oh, I mean, there's so much down, right down to the Sega Genesis fart score that's throughout this whole movie.
It's the worst. It is the fucking worst. This is definitely one of those movies where it's like nothing works in this movie, like, period. There's nothing good about this movie. Yet for some reason, it's so charming because of how bad it is, and somebody really thought they were making something cool. It misses on every fucking possible level it shoots for. It's so bad.
Yeah, even down to, like I said, like the weird thing about how, like, the comedic repartee still manages to be funny bad, because, like, we've talked about before, seeing somebody, like, try and be funny is usually death. But in this case, they're, like, so invested, like, no, these jokes are gonna fucking work, that they do stuff like, whenever they're talking to the police chief, which is, of course, a staple of any of these buddy cop movies, it's like, oh, the police chief is, like, getting so pissed off, and they, like, grill him to the point where he's just like, oh, I'm so tired of you guys, and then, fucking Mark kisses him on the head, and is like, how dare you do that? And then the scene goes on forever. The police chief's just like, I'm pointing, still pointing. All right, I'm done pointing. And we're still gonna go. Okay, I'm gonna sit down. All right, fine, I'll sit down.
Okay, I'm gonna smile. I'm gonna smile.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna fall asleep. There's so many things where it's just like, oh, any reasonable person would have cut so much earlier than this, and it's like, nope, we're gonna keep going.
That's the thing about this movie, though. If you were to cut where it should have been cut, you get a 15-minute movie.
That's true. There's a lot of that.
It's ridiculous. The super far away footage of them parking cars and walking and stuff, where it's like they obviously didn't have a fucking permit. Like, it's so clear. It's ridiculous. And yet you can still perfectly hear every word they're saying. And they're like half a mile down the fucking road.
Or how many times people, like, get horribly maimed and they have to, like, react after a second. Like, the guy who gets run over during the big freeway chase at the beginning. It's like, oh no, running him over. And then it cuts to him. He's got blood on his knees and he's laying there still. And you can clearly see where someone said, like, and go. And he's just like, oh, God, no! And then limbs again.
The parking lot fight. Where, I mean, he's just hacking limbs off and shit. Like, it doesn't even matter. Like, you're a fucking cop, dude. Like, you can't be doing this.
I just love especially this is all happening at this restaurant, which we kind of talked about the monologue that happens earlier. But there's so many other, like, that, the weird trajectory of that scene is so fascinating, where it's like, the villains are having the weird, like, breakfast seafood meal at this restaurant, then Matt Hannon comes in and talks them down, and then they leave and they talk to the weird, flamboyant waiter. Like, her father owned the restaurant, but then he died. Oh, he killed himself? Yeah. It's weird, light, free, fun little bit of just like, oh, we're talking about this guy's suicide. Isn't it fun? Aren't we having fun here? And then they go into the parking lot, which gets horribly shot up. Murder everywhere that's going on in this fucking parking lot scene. And then just like, oh man, guess it's time to continue the case. This all happens in the span of like 10 fucking minutes.
Forensics will have a field day with this.
A guy threw a grenade under a car and exploded twice.
I absolutely love, like, the head of the main bad guys, like their gang or whatever, with his fucking mullet and mustache.
Oh yeah, and he has one of the great monologues too in this movie, just like, I want his head on my piano so people know not to mess with me. He just goes on forever about this.
Just yeah, like so I want his head on my piano. It's so badly dubbed. Oh my god. There's a lot of mullets and mustaches. Robert Zadar's got a mullet.
Yeah, it's the late 80s, early 90s. It was prime time for that.
I can't stress enough, though, for anybody listening, if you've maybe not seen this movie because you've heard it was so terrible, A, you're right. It's that terrible. But B, it's that terrible in such a beautiful, fun way.
Yeah, like, if you're a fan of any of the movies we've talked about, like Miami Connection or The Room, like these so famously funny bad movies, this fits, like, right in that pantheon.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's 1,000% worth a watch.
And by the way, also consider, like, we're describing all these things about Samurai Cop. It doesn't really capture the weird, feverish frenzy of this fucking weird-ass movie that we can't even describe with words that are so beautifully presented. Like, Matt Hannon's super red face when he's fucking fighting Akamura.
So bad.
He's so... Like, all of the blood in his body is in his face. Like, it's completely seeped out of every other fucking part of his body.
That's literally what I was going to say. We can describe these scenes as much as we want. The facial expressions that these fuckers are pulling off in these scenes, it's the most bizarre shit you've ever seen. Like, Robert Zadar just has one facial expression, which is wide, but he does it very well.
God rest his soul, that's true.
God rest his soul, but Jesus Christ.
God rest his soul, his beautiful, beautiful giant-ass chin.
Giant-ass chin. But it's just their climactic, and I'm using air quotes, sword fight, where it's like they clearly don't know what they're doing. Neither of these guys have any idea how to use a sword. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, and it's on Amazon Prime right now. Definitely recommend, if you have that service, to just stream it at your soonest possibility, where you can, like, either do it with a bunch of friends or, you know, by yourself. It doesn't matter. It's still so massively entertaining. And I guess that my final thoughts pretty much are just that. Like, it fits under the pantheon of, like, so bad they're good movies that, like, so many movies, like, have been marketed as and try to be, but this is, like, the one of the few truly pure examples in the canon. It definitely is one of those that deserves, if anything, more love than some of the other ones. Like A Room, while it still has so much fun, we've talked about previously on the show, how that one feels a bit more slow and gangly and awkward. This one, despite how gangly and awkward it is, it's like a breeze to watch. The only times where you'll be like, oh, this is kind of slow, is when you're having to go back and repeat things that you're like, wait, that didn't just happen. You're gonna use your Amazon fucking 10-second back function a lot watching this fucking movie.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because you're like, did I miss something? No, you didn't.
I absolutely echo everything you just said. I think as far as the so bad it's good movies, this deserves, near the top credits. Because it's not trying to be so bad it's good. They weren't relying on it to be so bad it's good. They haven't come out since it's come out and be like, no, we were purposely trying to make a bad movie. You know, it's just, it is what it is. Like Miami Connection, like this. They made a movie. It was a foreigner who made a movie that he thought this is what American movies are like.
This is my Lethal Weapon. This is clearly like as good as like Mel Gibson, Danny Glover chemistry.
1,000%. And he thought he really nailed something here, and it just failed. But then, like I said, on the flip side, then you got Tommy Wiseau, who thought he was making an American movie, but then come out, no, I purposely made a bad movie. Fuck you. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You're trying to keep your 5 minutes of fame going, which is fine too. Whatever. I can't make a movie. I'm not some weird fucking Transylvanian billionaire or whatever the fuck he is.
Somehow conned people into spending $6 million on this budget.
Good for him. But it's no, Samurai Cop is definitely near the top. I'd easily throw it in the top 5 of the best so bad it's good movies.
Though we still would say Miami Connection keeps its crown at the very top amongst movies we've covered on the show.
Oh, without a question. Yeah, without way to go to there is no. Dude, the guy getting the mail with his underwear hanging out. Like, what the fuck is going on? It's a message from my father. Yeah.
My father. Oh, we talked about that. Like I said, episode 2. Can you believe it? It's been like nearly 2 years since we fucking did that episode.
Holy shit, balls.
Right out the gate with our best bad movie we've ever done.
I don't think it's any. I don't see anything trumping it, man. I really don't.
Unless you loyal listeners out there can recommend something that might dare to try and topple Miami Connection, please. And we'll consider it in our bank of movies to cover for future episodes. Our picks. So we'll be doing that later on in this episode for 2 good movies and 2 bad movies each of us have. But before we get to that, we got some feedback to share, because every week on @DEDBpod on both Facebook and Twitter, we ask you all to share your thoughts about, like, hey, what are the good and bad examples from this topic that we're doing for the episode? And so we had a few people share their thoughts. First, James Rodriguez says, The Nice Guys and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang are terrific examples of the buddy cop duo, where Shane Black tends to succeed. Hot Fuzz is also a pretty damn tremendous example, utilizing Nick Frost and Simon Pegg brilliantly. As for bad, K9, with Jim Belushi acting opposite a dog, has less charisma than his co-star, which I've never seen K9. Have you seen Top Dog?
Yeah.
With Chuck Norris?
Yep. I've seen Top Dog. I've seen K9. I've seen Rin Tin Tin, K9 Cop. I've seen Turner and Hooch. I've seen all of those.
Oh, well, you're the true connoisseur of dog and cop cinema.
Yep.
I was tempted to do Top Dog. Because if nothing else, if you don't know what Top Dog is, it's Chuck Norris and a dog, and you figure, like, oh, this is going to be a lighthearted romp. Their villains are a bunch of white supremacists that are trying to, like, blow up a fucking school, like, fair or something like that. That's the villain in this, like, Chuck Norris is teamed up with the dog movie. Like, oh my god, he just tore up my couch. Now what are we going to do? Oh yeah, stop the white supremacists from killing children.
That is so ballsy. What a ballsy movie.
Yeah, no, exactly. Oh, you can't say that about many Chuck Norris movies, for sure.
No, or dog movies.
Or that's true. No, Air Bud didn't go to that length. I know there's so many straight-to-video sequels, maybe. Is that one of the Air Buddies ones with the little tiny puppies? Have to stop white supremacists?
Homeward Bound, the sequel, the area in front. Look, this is insane.
But on the flip side, James is talking about Shane Black, obviously sort of like the king of that. And it's such a bummer that, Predator's probably going to stall his career for a bit, because I'd love to see him do more fun stuff like that.
When I saw The Nice Guys, I think the hype sort of built it up too much for me. And I've only seen it the one time, but I do want to revisit it. But I do remember thinking that Ryan Gosling was the shit in it.
That scene where, like, Russell Crowe encounters him in the bathroom, the door keeps closing on him, is such brilliant physical comedic acting. It's so ingenious.
And obviously Kiss Kiss Bang Bang was, my alternate choice. I think it's a fantastic, fantastic movie.
Yeah, really the movie that started the Robert Downey Jr. comeback, more so than even, like, well, an Iron Man, like, solidified it, but, like, that and Zodiac were the 2 movies where it's like, oh, he actually still can act. He isn't, like, completely drugged out and insane, as opposed to, cut to now. We're recording this the week of Doolittle coming out.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
But yeah, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang did such a great job of, like, getting him, and also it was such a good, like, spotlight for Val Kilmer after, like, a decade or so of, like, being in, like, really lesser movies. Like, almost, like, I think he was doing straight-to-video movies at that point, and then, like, this comes about, like, oh my god, he's so, like, vibrant and fun as the gay Perry character. It works so well, and then unfortunately just kind of went back to doing lesser stuff after that.
Dude, I've always thought that he never really got to the heights that I think he could have been.
Which mainly was partially self-sabotage on his part, if you consider some of the stuff that, like, happened. Yeah. Like, I know after his, like, especially his recent cancer treatment, I'm not sure how, like, big and like lively his career can be from here. But like after that, and also MacGruber, I wished he would just do more like fun comedy roles, especially fun like dickish villain comedy roles. He would be perfect for it.
Yeah, he was really funny in MacGruber.
To keep going with our feedback, though, Kara Holden says, best ones are obvious: Lethal Weapon, Beverly Hills Cop, Nice Guys, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, etc. Worst ones I would have to say are Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, Showtime, Taxi, R.I.P.D. I have a controversial opinion with Beverly Hills Cop. I think 2 is the best one of that franchise.
I'm 100% with you. I think they leaned more onto the comedy in the second one, gave all the characters a little bit looser personalities, and I think it really worked a lot more.
And it also helps that, like, compared to, like, Martin Brisk kind of shoots the first movie very flatly, just to, like, really display Eddie Murphy's, like, comedic back and forth. You have the addition of, like, Eddie Murphy's fun back and forth with people, and then Tony Scott shooting the fuck out of it, and it looks so great. Beverly Hills Cop 2 is one of the best shot, like, buddy cop comedies ever. It's so good.
Tony Scott, man, that dude knew how to fucking point a camera. He was really good. He's underrated, Tony Scott.
Very underappreciated, I agree, yes. Like, he often got dismissed for doing dumb movies, which he did. Like, no disputing that. He did a lot of dumb movies.
Well, he did a lot of dumb movies, and it was also, his brother's more famous.
Right, of course, but then you get stuff like, Beverly Hills Cop 2, or, like, The Hunger is a super underappreciated movie, or...
True Romance.
True Romance. Man on Fire, I think, is Denzel's best performance, honestly.
That's such a good movie.
Yeah, we definitely need to cover some Tony Scott movies in the future.
Even Domino looks good. It's not a great movie, but it looks great.
That's one of the ones I haven't seen.
Well, you probably never will, so go fuck yourself.
Okay. Well, to keep on going with our feedback, Luis A. Ramirez says, I'm going to recommend Freebie and the Bean, which may be the prototype for the action buddy cop movie. As for some of the least favorites, I'll say City Heat and The Rookie. I guess Eastwood plays better with partners who die or get grievously injured. Oh, and I also enjoyed The Hidden, which is kind of a twist on the genre with one half being an alien and all. Plus, you get a tiny scene with Danny Trejo as a jail prisoner with a loud mouth.
Yeah, The Hidden is really good. Have you seen The Hidden?
I have not seen The Hidden.
That's a really good movie, dude. I definitely recommend The Hidden. It's an alien and human, partnership in the fact that the alien's almost like a symbiote inside of it.
So it's like All of Me, but as a buddy cop movie?
Yeah, basically. Well,
that sounds great. Okay.
It's really fucking violent, too. It's a good movie, though, man. I really enjoy The Hidden. And the rest of those, a lot of those, I don't know that I've seen some of those that he mentioned.
Yeah, Freebie and the Bean, I know, is one I've heard of before. That's the one, it's James Caan of Alien Nation, and Alan Arkin is his partner. I've heard that sort of like laid a lot of the groundwork for the later buddy cop movies, because that was like 1972, so it's a really early one. I'm only curious, if anything, because young Alan Arkin is so fascinating to me, because like that dude never looked young in my lifetime.
I was going to say, yeah, you can only picture old Alan Arkin. That's the same way I am. I don't want to see young Alan Arkin. It creep me the fuck out, man. I'm going to have nightmares.
Like, that might work for some cases. Like, have you ever seen Wait Until Dark? The movie with Audrey Hepburn? Where she plays the blind lady and he's like the guy home invading, like while she's blind.
I think I have, but it's probably been forever.
That's a very good movie, nothing else, because he is terrifying in that movie, which is so weird, because it's fucking Alan Arkin. It's like, no, you're Little Miss Sunshine, Grandpa. What the fuck are you doing?
Right. Hey, you're the guy from the Rocketeer. Stop it.
And then previous guest Jonathan Habda McHale at Black_Gendo says, I legit like the first 2 Rush Hour movies. The Other Guys is a buddy cop classic people need to see again. I don't know which is worse, R.I.P.D. or Bright. Either way, they're both awful.
I will say R.I.P.D. is worse than Bright. I honestly think so. R.I.P.D. is unwatchably bad.
This is the one with Jeff Bridges and Ryan Reynolds.
And Kevin Bacon.
Right, which I've heard
Men in Black, but with ghosts.
Right. That's what I've heard. I saw the trailers and stuff, and didn't know Kevin Bacon was in until I read a review. It's like, oh, he wanted to be hidden from any marketing material on this, and that's Kevin Bacon.
Nor did you know it was based on a comic book. R.I.P.D. was a big dark horse sort of deal, and no, we're not going to even mention that because it's bad. It's really, really bad.
And, my thing with the Rush Hour movies, this is weird. I've only seen the third one, and only under extenuating circumstances, where I was really trying hard as a kid to sneak into Rob Zombie's Halloween, and I got kicked out of there. So then I saw Rush Hour 3. Yeah,
you got to see the first 2, man. They're fucking great. The first one especially still really, really kind of holds up. Another seems like a missed opportunity. Chris Tucker in Rush Hour, the first one and the second one, is so fucking funny and so quick and smart, and the chemistry between him and Jackie Chan, I mean, it's really, really palpable. Those are good movies, man. I agree with Jonathan. If I were you, well, I'm not you, but I'm going to recommend that, yeah, check them out. You might like them.
Yeah, I've only been kind of detracted from them just because of the Brett Ratner of it all.
Yeah, I know. God damn it.
What are some other like buddy cop movies that maybe weren't mentioned here that you'd want to spotlight, Adam?
Well, I mean, a lot of the big ones were hit. Obviously, Lethal Weapon. Have you seen Lethal Weapon?
Yes, I've seen Lethal Weapon 1 and 2. I might even be more leaning toward 2. I think 2 has a lot of like the like interesting like funners. That's one of the better examples of like a sequel. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really good sequel. And I mean, we already covered one of them, like Tango and Cash. I think is a great buddy cop movie. Running Scared with Billy Crystal and
Gregory Hines, very good one. A very
Gregory,
one. Yes.
Great one. The Last Boy Scout, another Shane Black one.
Very underrated. Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans, I never would have imagined working together, and it's so
exactly. Good. And apparently they hate each other. Hate it.
Not shocking at all.
No, of course not. I mean, but there's a lot out there. I love that Hot Fuzz got the mention because Hot Fuzz is great.
One of my favorite movies of all time. Yes.
It's so fucking good. One of my favorite Will Ferrell movies is The Other Guys. I think The Other Guys is absolutely hilarious, and I think that's another really good send-up deconstruction of the buddy cop movie. I think that's a really, really well done.
I'll only add 2 because I do agree with like so many of those choices there. But one that's I think is super underrated from the brother of the guy who was recently nominated for 3 Billboards, John Michael McDonough, the movie The Guard, starring Brendan Gleeson and Don Cheadle.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen that, though.
So good. Such a phenomenal movie. Where especially, like, Brendan Gleeson is a full-on corrupt, shitty cop. And they don't shy about the fact that he is such a piece of shit. If anything, it does a better job of kind of confronting a shitty cop character than the 3 Billboards movie does with fucking Sam Rockwell, but he won an Oscar for it. What the fuck ever. Fine. I have many issues with that movie. Anyway, but also, I think one that got a lot of shit at the time, but I recently watched like last year, and I think deserves a lot more credit. Miami Vice, the movie that Michael Mann did with Colin Farrell and Jamie Foxx, I think is very well done. It's much more of like a traditional cop drama than buddy cop, but it is like there's some fucking great electrifying sequences in that whole movie. It deserves a lot more credit.
Oh, I completely agree. I think you figured this out. I think any constant listeners, I'm a huge Michael Mann fan too. You know, 1 or 2 more that to throw in there. A 7.
The funnest buddy cop movie of all time.
But Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman do have good chemistry together. And then the only other one I can think of that maybe doesn't get mentioned is, well, it does get mentioned, but I don't think it's considered in the pantheon of buddy cop movies, is The French Connection.
Yeah, people don't give enough credit, especially Roy Scheider is not really talked about in that movie. He's so good.
Yeah, no, he's really good as Russo.
And he got like a nomination for it. It's just like, oh fuck, you're like basically created the sidekick cop character in that movie. Yeah, that's a tremendous pick. Yeah,
and what a hell of a movie too. Especially that movie basically gave us Gene Hackman.
And I mean, it has one of the most iconic car chases of all time underneath the fucking bridge or the train tracks. Yeah, in Chicago.
Yeah, the subway. Yeah.
No, whatever. The mass transportation, whatever they call it.
It's on the thing with the wheels. Yeah, fuck you.
Well, us 2 salty cops need to like get off the case as soon as possible. So we want to thank you all for that feedback. We also want to thank Chris Oliver for the intro and outro music used on the show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Alex Carter for the art that we use for our show as the logos and such. And you can find us, as I mentioned, on @DEDBpod on Facebook and Twitter. Or you can also email us feedback, doubleedgedoublebill@gmail.com. And I do my own individual musings on @NotTheWho'sTommy on Twitter and Instagram. And I also do some writing at marianithomas.wordpress.com, where I do reviews and stuff. And I also do some satirical superhero news over at TrueSuperheroFans.com. I just would have put out an article recently about the Gambit movies totally happening, with a series of updates about how it might not actually be happening. And Adam, you got anything to plug?
I'm still kind of working on the Ghoulish Gourds. It's facebook.com/Ghoulish Gourds. I've been a little bit backlogged lately, but I'm still cracking along. If anybody wants to reach out to me on there and commission a piece, I'll cut you a deal. Say you heard it on the show, and then other than that, I am fucking nowhere. I am a goddamn ghost on the internet, and I love it. Fuck you guys and your Snapchats and your Zimas and your hula hoops.
Oh, and your Quibbies and all that, yeah.
Your chat roulettes. Play Russian roulette like a human.
If you want more great commentary on the modern digital landscape like that, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms. In fact, if you go to YouTube, I finally organized the YouTube channel for the first time since we fucking started. And I created a bunch of playlists so you can listen to all our 2018 episodes in one playlist, all our 2019 episodes, and all the 2020 shows that'll be coming out as things go along. I'll make sure to keep that updated for all of you. And we do apologize, some of the shows didn't transfer to YouTube because of just some issues with Podbean and displaying them outright, but I do have links in the description for the episodes that couldn't be on the YouTube channel, just due to some of those errors. Apologies for that. But if you're listening on the ESO show network, why don't you queue up some of our other episodes on that Podbean app that weren't put out there at the first 67 episodes or so. And if you just rate, review, or share the show around, we would really appreciate that because it gets us more visibility on the digital landscape that Adam cannot be found on.
Plus, I really want to know that we're either one of the top or the top show on ESO. That's what I want to know.
You really just want dominance in the ESO hierarchy?
Yeah, I really want dominance. Because then I'm going to send myself in like a furry suit. Maybe not perverse. That's a little wrong.
I don't know why we needed to be in a... Do you have a fox outfit ready? Is this the secret? Are you coming out at him as a furry?
No, I don't have a fox suit. What's wrong with you? It's an English bulldog suit.
I'm sorry to misrepresent your fursona out there for the public.
Mr. Teacup.
Mr. Adam Thomas, a.k.a. Mr. Teacup. For all of your furry convention needs, look at his schedule. Now, Adam, we are going to do our picking for next week, because recently the Academy Award nominations came out, and not too long we're going to be having the Oscars. A really truncated award season, because that's the first weekend of February. And usually they aren't until like the first weekend of March or so. They're really like trying to get it out there. Last year we did an Oscar show where it was about Best Picture winners specifically. We decided to vary it up a bit more because we like talking about the history of the Academy Awards. It's interesting from a film perspective. And we decided to talk about Academy Awards darlings, which, keep in mind, the definition of that is basically a movie that had at least 3 or more nominations at the Academy Awards, because it's really weird to look back. It's like, oh, that movie got nominated for 9 Oscars. What the fuck? Like we were just talking about Dolittle, the original Dr. Dolittle, nominated for 9 Oscars. That's weird because it's terrible.
It's an awful film.
Yes, but you, even if you're maybe not as big a fan of the modern awards season, it's fascinating to go back to the history of it. Of course, Adam, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think you could consider yourself a fan of film and not revisit the past Academy Award winners. I mean, for a lot of people, and myself included, that's maybe swayed your decision to see certain movies that maybe you wouldn't have seen or cared to watch before.
That's true, yeah. There are plenty of movies I never would have seen if I wasn't on the quest of, eventually before I leave this mortal coil, I want to watch every Best Picture winner.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I want to do that, too. I mean, there's some that I've already seen that I don't ever want to watch again.
It's true. There are plenty. Have you seen Green Book yet?
No. But before we do our picking, can I say
yes
that depending on what you pick, you're going to be really mad at me, I think.
Oh.
Depending on what the options.
That's very interesting, okay, because I have the 2 good picks, and you have the 2 bad picks.
Yeah.
And as we said before, we've assigned both our movies number 1 and 10, and so each of us will pick a number between 1 and 10 for the opposite choices, and that gets us whatever closest one. So let's just start off with the good news, Adam. For my 2 good picks, number between 1 and 10.
I'll go 10.
All right. At number 8, I had a movie nominated for 10 Oscars, won 4 of them. Didn't win Best Picture at the time, but has become even more relevant as time has gone on. 1976's Network.
Oh, what a good movie. I've been meaning to revisit that, too.
Same. That's really why I had it here.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah, that's great. What's your other choice?
At number 7, I had The Apartment, which was nominated for 10 Oscars, won 5, including Best Picture.
I've never seen that.
I love that movie. It's one of my favorite Billy Wilders out there.
Oh, boy. Okay, so gun is in your hands.
All right, it's time to make my shot for the finale of this buddy cop actioner. I'm going to go with number 2.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
I got to ask you a question.
Okay.
Is this real life? Or is this just fantasy? Caught in a landslide. No. Yeah, dude, you got Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh, man. You know what? I'm at least glad that we get to talk about how shitty this movie is. Because
I haven't seen it yet.
Well, that's true, and so many people love it. So many people love this movie. It made like $1 billion worldwide. And I can't wait to talk about...
Get on people, you're excited to do that.
No, not shit on people, but explain why this fucking sucks. I'm so glad. I'm filled with righteous anger right now, Adam.
At number 6, I had Dick Tracy.
You know, yeah, I don't hate Dick Tracy necessarily.
Nah, hold on. People like Dick Tracy because of the look and the makeup. Other than that, it's a dog shit of a film.
I wouldn't say it's a dog shit of a movie. I think it's a very muddled studio production. If anything else, it's another example where it's like Warren Beatty was not the person to play Dick Tracy. Like at all. He's so a wet noodle. But I would give credit. I think that's the best Madonna performance in the movie, which isn't saying a lot, but I think she's like perfectly cast for that film.
Yeah, it's legitimately saying nothing, but I guess I have to agree with you.
Oh, well, so Bohemian Rhapsody and Network. That'll be very interesting.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about a movie directed by Bryan Singer. Great. So...
oh, no.
Well, mostly directed by Bryan Singer. We'll get into that next time.
Exactly.
But until then, Adam, I guess we got to get in our car and we got to do our big finale chase scene.
Can I put my feet out the window?
Sure, and you know what? I'll see you back at my place. Finger guns.
Okay, bye.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping through Amazon.com or the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.